Alright, hello and welcome, fellow users of the internet. My name is Noah and you're watching Asphodel Merchants. Alright, hopefully you know that we are doing the sealed and draft tier list for all of the cards in Wilds of Eldraine. Hopefully you've already seen the tier list for black. Go check it out if you haven't after this. I'll leave a link at the end. Leave a link to the playlist anyway. But yeah, now we're doing red. Wonder how much I want to get. Yeah, okay. Scroll this part, not scroll the other one. Starting off with Belligerent of the Bulk. Gosh, AJ, you are so loud. 2 colorless and a red for a creature orc warrior. It's a 3/3. It's got Celebration. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield under your control this turn, target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains menace until end of turn. I think that this is a solid B. You're going to be happy enough with this card a lot of the time. It is a powerful effect, and 3 mana for a 3/3 is never going to be a bad deal. By the way, I guess I'll just explain this. I really hope you guys can't hear that well. Alright, we've got our A pluses, which are cards that your deck will definitely be worse off without. They really help you win the game, and they always help you not lose. They're the best. They're some of the best cards in the format, and the ones you always hopefully hope to find. A's are cards that are definitely helpful. They'll be very powerful and very game-changing, but not quite A pluses. B's are cards that are certainly above average. C's are the bread and butter of your deck. They're not always that much to write home about, but they are going to be the majority of the cards in your deck. D's are cards that are very underpowered. They are not really good. You really want to avoid having them in your deck. They'll normally drag you down. And F's are the unplayables. They're the trap cards. They will always make your deck worse, and you should very actively avoid playing them. Alright, and next up we have Bellowing Bruiser. 4 colorless and a red for a creature. It's an ogre. It's a 4/4. And it also has an adventure, which is Beat a Path, which is 2 colors and a red for up to 2 target creatures can't block this turn. And yeah, I think this all leads up to a C. The adventure mechanic is very good, but this particular adventure doesn't help you really accrue you any value, and so I don't think it's always that good. But a 5 mana 4/4 haste is perfectly serviceable. I'm going to call it a C. Alright, next up we have Bespoke Battle Guard. 1 colorless and a red for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0. And its equip cost is 2. But if you have your celebration, meaning at the beginning of combat on your turn, if 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield under your control this turn, attach Bespoke Battle Guard to up to 1 target creature you control. Giving something +2/+0 doesn't really give it any evasion, and it also doesn't really give it any extra survivability. So I think I'm only going to give Bespoke Battle Guard a D. I'm not really impressed with this card, and I don't really think you're going to miss it whenever you don't play it. Alright, next up we have Boundary Lands Ranger. A colorless and a red for a creature human ranger. It's a 2/2, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. We've got a ferocious payoff here for all of my paper boomers out there who are playing in Cons of Dark here. I am going to give Boundary Lands Ranger an A as well. 2 mana 2/2s are always pretty good, and being able to filter out some dead cards, help find your land drops, or help find additional gas is always going to be relevant. So B. Alright, next up we have Charming Scoundrel. Oof, yep. Want to be careful running into her at night. Yep, colorless and a red for a creature human rogue. She's a 1/1, and she's got haste. When Charming Scoundrel enters the battlefield, choose 1. You can discard a card, then draw a card. Create a treasure token, or create a wicked roll token attached to target creature you control. She might seem a little innocuous, but there is just so much going on. She has so much modality that I'm going to give her an A, because discard a card, then draw a card, good in the late game. Normally your 2 mana haster is only really good in the early game, but with this first ability, she can help you root away a land that you remember to keep. That way you can hopefully find another spell. Making the treasure tokens really good in the mid game because it helps you cast your 4 or 5 drop a turn early. And just early on, just 2/2 haste with the upside. The Wicked roll is the one that when it's put into the graveyard, they lose a life. So I'm going to go ahead and give it an A to Charming Scoundrel. Alright, next up we've got Cut In, 3 colorless and a red for a sorcery. Cut In deals 4 damage to target creature. Create a Young Hero roll token attached to up to 1 target creature you control, and the Young Hero roll is the one, if it's got toughness 3 or less, put a +1/+1 counter on it. This is either a very low B or perhaps a high C. No, okay, wait. I do think I'm going to put it in B, and I lied. It's a very high B. I was thinking of a different card that I had pre-graded. Cut In's definitely a B. You always want really to max out on removal spells in your limited deck. It really almost always works out. And Cut In's just very 4 mana for 4 damage might not seem very efficient, but it is, especially, you always want them to get access to some of those higher numbers with your burn spells. And this hero roll token, I think, is going to be valued a little bit more than you might think. So B for that one. Next up, we have Edgewall Pack, 3 colorless and a red for a creature dog. It's a 3/3 and it has menace. And when it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 black rat that can't block. It says rats on it. It's a good card. But in all honesty, Edgewall Pack is very efficient. We have seen a lot of these hill giants that give you a 1/1 just really overperform in their respective limited formats, and I think that's going to be true here. I think I'm going to still stick it in the very top of C. If you wanted to value this at a low B-, you might be correct, but I think C's and a high C, perhaps C+, is pretty reasonable for Edgewall Pack. Alright, next up we have Emberearth Veteran. 1 red for a creature Human Knight. It's a 2/1 and it has 1 colorless. Sacrifice Emberearth Knight, create a Young Hero roll token attached to another target creature. I think this card's just a C. Its ability, in my opinion, is really weird. I don't really know when you're going to be just wanting to sacrifice your 2/1 just to put a aura token onto your card to one of your other smaller creatures to help it maybe win a combat or get through one. I'm just not impressed with this card at all. I'm tempted to give it a D, but a 1 mana 2/1 should normally be good enough in your red aggressive decks. So C for that. Alright, next up we have Flick a Coin. 2 colorless and a red for an instant. Flick a Coin deals 1 damage to any target. You create a treasure token and draw a card. This has got to be, this is one of those cards, I will probably always play it as, an A, even though it isn't quite there. I'm going to go ahead and give it a B just because it does so much. Being able to kill your opponent's 1 toughness creatures, always really good. Making a treasure token and drawing a card, this is giving me some very Manamorphose vibes. And I'm probably wrong and probably giving it a little bit too much credit, but especially if you give it the build-around grade. If I gave it a build-around grade, it's a personally an A, because I bet in the Blue-Red Spells Matter deck, this is going to be amazing, and probably even in a lot of the other decks, because in Red-Green, it's going to help you play your Big Dumb Stompers a lot more quickly, and I can even see it helping out a lot in Black-Red. Probably the worst it's going to be in is Red-White, because they're going to want their removal spells to be a little bit more efficient, and they're not that interesting in paying 3 mana to draw a card. But right now I'm going to leave it in B. Alright, next up we have Food Fight, a colorless and a red for an enchantment. Artifacts you control have pay 2, sacrifice this artifact. It deals damage to any target equal to 1, plus the number of permanents named Food Fight you control. First off, this card is pretty powerful. However, It is true that there aren't quite as many food makers as you might think in this set. I was rereading some of the colors a minute ago, and there just don't seem to be as many as I originally had thought. So finding them might be an issue some of the time. There's definitely not that many in red, so you're going to need a lot of help from green or black to really make this card work. With that being said, though, this does also affect your treasures. So all of the treasures that red can make have pay to sacrifice and deal 2 damage to anything. So making all of your foods and treasures into shocks is pretty good, and you always have to take Food Fight and Draft probably, because if you were to ever get your second copy of Food Fight and resolve them first, turning them all into bolts, it becomes very amazing. I'm going to give Food Fight, you know what, it's not going in A+, and I don't even know if it's an A, because it still does cost a lot of mana. I think it's just going to be a high B. Very valuable card. You're going to be happy enough with it a lot of the time. Alright, next up, we have Frantic Firebolt. 2 colorless and a red. For an instant, Frantic Firebolt deals X damage to target creature, where X is 2 plus the number of cards in your graveyard that are instant cards, sorcery cards, and or have an adventure. The card's an A. It's really good. It's going to end up doing a lot of damage to your opponent's creatures. The floor of 2 at instant speed really helps this card out a ton, and this should normally kill just about anything you're going to run into feasibly. Alright, next up we have Gnawing Crescendo. 2 colorless and a red. For an instant, creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies this turn, create a 1/1 black rat creature token with this creature can't block. Alright, this is also a C. It's a rat card, so it's very good, of course. I'm being a little silly. I really can't wait to play with a Rakdos Rats deck. But Trumpet Blast has been a pretty good performer in the past. This spotting you with a token is definitely very good, and I think that a lot of the time in these red style decks you're going to want to be the beat down, and it's going to work out pretty good. Alright, next up we have Godric Cloaked Reveler. A colorless and red for a legendary creature, Human Noble. It's got haste, and it's got the celebration mechanic. As long as 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield under your control this turn, Godric Cloaked Reveler is a dragon with base power and toughness 4/4, flying, and pay 1 red. Dragons you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. It loses all of the creature types. Right, it stops being a human noble and becomes a dragon. There's an A+. It's amazing. When just curving out with this on turn 3 when you're on the play is going to be really cool. If you're on the draw and you think your opponent has already played a good blocker, you can actually hold this card and play it on turn 4, and with another 1-drop creature or a 1-drop any kind of permanent, it becomes the 4/4. And even on turn 5, if you were to play this and then play a 2-drop, and it becomes the 4/4, that's also super good. So A+ for Godric Cloaked Reveler. It's one of the best red cards. Okay, next up we have Grabby Giant, which is 3 colorless and a red for a creature giant. It's got reach, and pay 2 colorless and a red, sacrifice an artifact or a land, and draw a card. It's a 4/3. And it's also got an adventure. That's mine, colorless and a red. For an instant, create a treasure token. I think that this card is going to end up playing like a B enough of the time. The reason is because we've seen this ability here of the pay an amount of mana, sacrifice an artifact or land, draw a card on some smaller creatures, and they've not played that well. But however, putting it on a 4/3 and not having to tap it to use it, I think is going to make us happy enough, because it's irrelevant enough of a creature that we're going to play this in enough of our aggro decks as the top end, and then if the game stalls out, it can help get us some more of our advantage back. And the adventure is just good enough. Like, just making a treasure is not all that amazing, but it's going to help you splash, It gives you an artifact to sacrifice, or you could even just play this on turn 2 in your opponent's end step, make your land drop, and have your 4/3 on turn 3. A little cannibalistic, but just sometimes that's what you gotta do. And so overall, I think this is going to play a little bit more like a B than a C, but we'll have to see how things turn out. All right, next up we have Grand Ball Guest, 1 colorless and a red for a creature human peasant. It's a 2/2 and it has the celebration mechanic. Grand Ball Guest gets +1/+1 and has trample as long as 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield under your control this turn. This is a really good card. I think this is going to be one of the best 2-drops you can ask for in your aggressive decks. And I think it could almost, like, it's weird. I feel like you could probably flip-flop Grabby Giant and Grand Ball in their ratings, because they are probably very close. It's actually probably going to be in the very top of C. I feel like it's always really going to perform well in the red aggressive decks, but not all of the red archetypes are going to maybe want to be that aggressive, and so for that reason, I think it'll just be in the top of C. All right, next up we have Harried Spear Guard. 1 red for a creature human soldier. It's a 1/1 and it's got haste. When Harried Spear Guard dies, create a 1/1 black rat creature token with this creature can't block. Why are you vermin so daft? This is a warehouse full of bricks. Bricks, you can't eat bricks. They're eating him. But yeah, Harried Spear Guard's a C. It says rats on it, so it's probably one of the best C's. You never know. But it's just pretty efficient. C for Harried Spear Guard. Next up we have Hearth Elemental, 5 colorless and a red for a creature elemental. It is a 4/5, and this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard that are instant cards, sorcery cards, and or have an adventure. This card is... Oh my gosh, I'm such a dork. Sorry for that minor technical difficulty. Is a B. It is a very high B. Oh right, did I even read the adventure part? It also has an adventure. Stroke of Genius. Pay a colorless and a red for... Pay a colorless and a red sorcery, discard your hand, then draw 2 cards. If you haven't been with us for a while, you can know that you can get yourself what is called Hellbent, which is not having any cards in your hand. And so if you don't have any other cards in your hand, when you pay the adventure, you don't discard anything essentially since you have no things to discard, but you can go ahead and draw those other 2 cards. You could also, maybe if you didn't think they were doing anything, just go ahead and whatever. And so being able to just pay 2 to draw 2 more cards, and then since this costs X less, and you've hopefully gotten very deep in the game, now this should be cheap enough for you to play these in the same turn. So all in all, that's what makes Hearth Elemental such a good card and a B. I'm going to scroll in again. I think I do. Maybe not. We'll see. Alright, next up we have Imodane, the Pyre Hammer. I lied. 1 more in. Yeah, that reads pretty good. Legendary creature, Human Knight. She's a 4/4. And whenever an instant or sorcery spell you control that targets only a single creature deals damage to that creature, Imodane deals that much damage to each opponent. This one has the right words. You pretty much, all of your commons and uncommons are going to deal damage to creatures only, and I think that is what makes this an A+. It turns all of your deal damage to a creature into, you know, kicked Searing Blazes or whatever. But really, I mean, just imagine casting something like Frantic Firebolt for like 4 or 5 on a creature, and then it also dealing 5 damage to them. Imodane is just insane. Of course, if you don't have any cards in your deck that deal damage to a creature, she's not going to be any good. But if you don't have any of those cards in your red deck, you're probably already going to lose. Also, just to note, I think this works with fight spells. Yeah, it does. Fight or bite spells in green. So if you were to ever get her into a red-green deck, she should be amazing. A+ for Imodane. Alright, next up we have Kindled Heroism. 1 red, target creature 1 red for an instant, target creature gets +1/+1, gains first strike until turn, scry 1. This card's a D. You're really not looking to cast this card very many of the times. It's just not that good. We've seen it before. It doesn't really work. Don't worry about prioritizing this. Alright, next up we have Corvald and the Noble Thief. 3 colorless and a red. It's a saga. Hopefully you already know how sagas work. You can read it. Chapter 1, create a treasure token. Chapter 2, create a treasure token. And Chapter 3, exile the top 3 cards of target opponent's library. You may play those cards this turn. I think this card's an F. I do not like it at all. Paying 4 mana just to make a treasure token is not very good at all. It doesn't play to the board well at all. I don't think it helps you when you're behind or when you're ahead. Of course, and just Chapter 2 only making another treasure token again. Not anything exciting. And exiling top 3 cards of your opponent's library can get kind of silly because, surprisingly enough, a lot of the time, like, your opponent's cards might not be that good, so it doesn't help. Also, you only have 2 treasure tokens to help you out, so if you get, like, more than one double-colored card that you can't cast with your own basic lands, you can't do anything. So it might just... This card can straight up do nothing, and I don't even think what it does when it really works is all that impressive. So I'm giving an F to it. Let's not talk about it anymore. Alright, next up we've got Merry Bards. You do get a Prelude. It's a C, but it is 2 colorless and a red for a creature, a Human Bard. It's a 3/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you may pay 1. When you do, create a Young Hero Roll token attached to target creature you control. This can target itself for what it's worth. Also, we're just putting kicker on cards and not calling it that. Whatever. Yeah, Merry Bards is a C. Next up, we've got Minecart Daredevil, 2 colorless and a red for a creature. It's a Dwarf Knight, and it's just a 4/2 with some flavor text. But it also has an adventure. 1 colorless and a red for an instant. Ride the Rails. Target creature gets +2/+1 until end of turn. This is also a C. Not that much to write home about. The adventures need to produce some form of card advantage to really get them over the edge. And this doesn't, but it's still a very serviceable card. There's also some other cross-adventure synergies, so that'll probably help this deck out overall. Alright, next up we have Monstrous Rage. 1 red for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Create a monster roll token attached to it, and the monster roll is enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has trample. This card's really good. Like, I kind of want to... Wait a minute, did I put it in C? Maybe that's a sign, but I kind of want to put it in B just because it's so efficient. 1 red mana for +3/+1 and trample just kind of feels like enough. I'm probably a little wrong. It's probably actually closer to a C, but for some reason I am just like confident that a lot of the times it's going to feel like a fine trade to your opponent. You're just going to play like 1 red and just like kill their creature and deal some extra damage to them and still have this extra 1/1 and trample on your creature. And it's just going to feel pretty sick. It can also even help on the block. I'm going to leave it in B for right now. I could be probably convinced that I'll only play like a C. Alright, next up we have Raging Battle Mouse. 1 colorless and a red for a creature mouse. This spell... It's a 2/1, and the second spell you cast each turn costs 1 less to cast. Celebration. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield under your control this turn, target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So just a note, you can play Raging Battle Mouse on turn 3, and then play another 2-drop for just 1 red mana. So, I think, for that reason, I'm going to give it a B. It seems like a powerful enough card, and the +1/+1 is going to help, like, your 2-drop attack into their 3-drop a lot of the time. It is a slight build around, but hopefully just putting more permanents on the battlefield isn't going to be that hard. Alright, next up we have Ratcatcher Trainee. 1 colorless and a red for a creature, human peasant. It's a 2/1, and as long as it's your turn, Ratcatcher Trainee has first strike. But it also has an adventure, Pest Problem. 2 colorless and a red, instant adventure. Create 2 1/1 black rat creature tokens with this creature can't block. Yup. In all honesty, Pest Problem is the real card I'm grading here. Ratcatcher Trainee is just a middling 2-drop you'd be okay with having in your aggressive decks. But Pest Problem's really good. It is still just a C, though. They can't block, and you need the other additional rat synergies to make this card better. But I do still think it's a pretty good C. Alright, next up, we have Realm Scorcher Hellkite. 4 colorless and red for a creature. It's a dragon. It's also a 4/6. It's got Bargain. You may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or creature. Sorry. You can sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or a token as you cast the spell. You can't sacrifice a creature. It's got Flying and Haste. Very dragony ability. When it enters the battlefield, if it was bargained, add 4 mana of in any combination of colors to your mana pool. It doesn't actually say mana pool, but whatever. 1 colorless and a red, Realm Scorcher deals 1 damage to any target. This card's an A+. It's just got great stats. It does a whole lot of things. Is it the A+est? It's close. I think the adventure one might be a little bit better. But yeah, the mythic 6-mana dragon is really good. Who'd have guessed? Alright, next up we have Redcap Gutter Dweller. 2 colorless and red for a creature, Goblin Warrior. It's a 3/3. It has Menace. When Redcap Gutter Dweller enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 black rats that can't block. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on Redcap Gutter Dweller and exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. This card is, in all honesty, an A+. It's amazing. It's a lot of power and a lot of stats for 4 mana, and it being able to sacrifice your rats to get an extra card off the top of your library to play is card advantage. It's super good. A+ for Redcap Gutter Dweller. We'll be finding our regular A's here in a minute. Next up, we have Redcap Thief. 2 colorless and a red for a creature. It's a Goblin Rogue. It's a 2/3, and when it enters the battlefield, make a treasure token. I'm really tempted to just give this an A. This card's really good. Alright. I think I'm just going to have to put it in B. It could very possibly be an A. But hopefully we'll round out the how this curve is working out a little bit better here. Alright, next up we have Rotisserie Elemental. 1 red for a creature. It's an elemental. It's a 1/1 with Menace. When this deals combat damage to a player, put a skewer counter on it. Then you may sacrifice it. If you do, exile the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of skewer counters on Rotisserie Elemental. You may play those cards this turn. This card feels like a lot of hoops to jump through. 1/1 Menace. 1/1 Menace for 1 is still pretty good. Deals combat damage to a player, put a skewer counter on it, then and sacrifice it. So maybe we're talking like 1 red, deal 2 damage to your opponent, exile the top card of your library. You can cast it this turn, but you get access to all your mana. Maybe depending on how low the curve is in your deck, it makes it even better. You do also get to play the land if you find it. I'm going to go ahead and give it an A, somewhat begrudgingly, but not really. We're going to have to see how this card works out to tell if it's better or worse than that. I can see it playing really well. I can see it playing a lot worse. We'll just have to see. Alright, next up we have Skewer Slinger. 1 colorless and a red for a creature. It's a Dwarf Knight. It's got reach. Whenever Skewer Slinger blocks or becomes blocked by a creature, it deals 1 damage to that creature. It is a C. We've seen this ability before. It is normally strong enough. Also, this ability on a 1/3 seems really powerful to me, so it's a C for Skewer Slinger. Next up, we have Song of Totentanz. Totentans. Yeah. X and a red for a sorcery. Create X 1/1 black rats that can't block. Creatures you control gain haste until end of turn. This is an A. It's a really powerful ability. It'll probably fireball your opponents out a lot of the time, and for all the ones that get through, you can buff them off later. Song of Totentaz gets an A. Alright, next up we have Stone Splitter Bolt. X and a red again. For an instant, it has Bargain. Stone Splitter Bolt deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker. If this spell was bargained, it deals X damage to that permanent instead. With the Bargain ability, I do think this gets up to the A range. Once you get to something like pay 4 mana to deal 3, but Bargain deal 6, you're killing pretty much anything your opponent can find for a bit of a mana advantage and at instant speed. It's A for Stone Splitter Bolt. It's going to work out. Okay, next up we have Tattered Ratter. Colorless and a red for a creature, human peasant. It's a 2/2, and whenever a rat you control becomes blocked, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. It's a really good card. I like it a lot. It says rats on it, so it's got to be good. However, not every red deck is going to be a rat deck. So I am going to put it in kind of the top end of C. The failsafe of being a 2-mana 2/2 is probably going to be okay, but there are probably some decks that aren't looking to play this card at all. Alright, next up we have pretty much the card of red. It's Torch the Tower, 1 red for an instant. It's got Bargain. Torch the Tower deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If this spell was bargained, it deals 3 damage to it instead, and you scry 1. If a permanent dealt damage by Torch the Tower would die this turn, exile it instead. This card is an A. It's borderlining A+. This is an obvious standard and constructed plant. It's amazing. It's never gonna disappoint you in your deck. It's great. Alright, next up is Twisted Fealty. 2 colorless and a red for a sorcery. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature, gains haste until end of turn. Create a Wicked Roll token attached to up to 1 target creature. Yet note that you don't have to put the Wicked Roll token on the creature you take control of. You get to put it on something else. So, like with every threaten ability, can you sacrifice a creature? If you can, the card's really good. If you can't, not normally. However, do note that with this, you can still take control of creature tokens. So if you take control of a creature token with this, they can be sacrificed to all of your bargain cards. And so that boosts the number of sacrifice effects you have greatly. With all that being said, I do think I'm just going to give it a C. It could be a really good C, and in the right decks, it's going to perform like a B and even trending towards A, but we might be having to ask a lot for all of those things to come together. Alright, next up we've got Two-Headed Hunter. 4 colorless and a red for a creature. It's giant, and it's got menace, and it's a 5/4. It's also got an adventure, twice the rage, colorless and a red for an instant. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. I think I'm gonna leave it in C for right now. It is a very good. In all honesty, it probably is better than all the silly rat cards that I like. I could see it performing like a B. It always has menace, right? Maybe it is a B. Okay, I will go ahead and put it in B because giving one of your creatures double strike to help it win combat's always going to be pretty good, and having the 5/4 menace as a payoff altogether probably gives it just enough stats to be a B, but if it was graded as a C, I wouldn't consider that incorrect. Alright, next up we have Unruly Catapult. 2 colorless and a red for a artifact creature construct. It's a 0/4 with Defender. It has tap. Unruly Catapult deals 1 damage to each opponent. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, untap Unruly Catapult. Unfortunately, I do think I have to give this card a D. If you're in the blue-red spells deck, you probably can end up doing a lot with this card. It does help block and keep you alive, and it can deal a lot of damage to your opponent, but in every other archetype, it's going to not do anything really, and not being able to attack is a bit of a knock against it. I'm just going to give a D to Unruly Catapult right now. It could end up performing a lot better with that, and in the blue-red spells deck, it is going to be a very high C and trending towards almost a B. But outside of that archetype, nothing really. Alright, next up we have Virtue of Courage. 3 colorless and red for an enchantment. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, you may exile that many cards from the top of your library. You may play those cards this turn. I want to tell you that this card is a silly commander card, and you're really not going to be able to play this kind of card in limited to any effect. However, it's 2 cards, because it has an adventure that's an instant. It's called Embereth Blaze. 1 colorless and a red. Embereth Blaze deals 2 damage to any target. And for that reason, I have to give this card an A+, because I said I have to give. Where the heck did it go? Yeah, I have to give it an A+. I could maybe just give it an A. But you're never going to cut the Embereth Blaze part from any of your red decks, because that's always going to be a good effect. And, you know, just getting to have the extra Virtue of Courage just on the adventure part and not have to worry about it is always going to make it fine. Now, with that being said, I was worried because it's whenever a source deals damage to an opponent, it's can't deal it to the creature. It has to deal it to the opponent. There are just enough at common and uncommon for it to not be ludicrous, because you have Flick a Coin at common, so you'll need some of those in your Virtue of Courage deck. Also, Unruly Catapult is a source that deals to opponents, so Unruly Catapult Virtue combo, and there's some down here in the Enchanting Tail slot with Impact Tremors and, where's the other common? And Raid Bombardment at uncommon. So, there's just enough. I almost begrudgingly have to put it in A+, but it'll be fine. Alright, next up we have Witch's Mark. It's a C. Colorless and a red. You may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards. Create a Wicked Roll token attached up to 1 target creature you control. You know, Tormenting Voice, normally in Modern Limited, you are going to want 1 copy, even in the most aggressive aggro decks. That way you can, you know, on turn 4 or 5, discard a land that you have no intention of playing to find you the last 2 spells you're going to need to get over the finish line and deal your 20th point of damage. And also, a Wicked Roll token is going to be a good enough additional piece of value to any of the creatures that you're going to be attacking with. So, it's a good C for Witch's Mark. Alright, next up we have Witchstalker Frenzy. 3 colorless and a red for an instant. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature that attacked this turn. Witchstalker Frenzy deals 5 damage to target creature. Note, this is any creature that attacked, so it also gets cheaper on your opponent's turn whenever they attack you, and that's going to make this an A. It's always going to be good. You're never going to cut Witchstalker Frenzy from any red deck. It's an A. Just deal with it. Alright, next up we have the adventure cards. Again, I made the executive decision that all of the actual top parts, the creature or the enchantment parts, are the colors they are. I'm not grading them in gold. You don't like it, you can do something else. First up we have Decadent Dragon, 2 colorless and red for a dragon that is a 4/4 with flying and trample. When it attacks, create a treasure token. And it's also got an adventure, Expensive Taste. 2 colorless and a black. Exile the top 2 cards of target opponent's library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. I really sincerely doubt you're ever going to play Expensive Taste as just the black card in a deck that has no chance of casting Decadent Dragon, but I could be proven wrong. With all that being said, though, I think Decadent Dragon is an A+, even without the adventure card. 4 mana for a 4/4 flying trample when it attacks make a treasure is a super efficient must-kill threat I think it's always going to be good, and also Expensive Taste is very flashable. Expensive Taste is very splashable, and we've seen plenty of creature creation in red, and we also have access to Evolving Wilds in this format, along with some other fixers, so being able to cast Expensive Taste shouldn't be hard, even in your aggro decks, and it's always going to be a very effective red threat that you're never going to cut. So, A+ for Decadent Dragon. Alright, next up we have Kellen the Fey-Blooded. 2 colorless and a red for a legendary creature, human fairy. Double strike. Other creatures you control get +1/+0 for each aura and equipment attached to Kellen the Fey-Blooded. And we have Birthright Boon, colorless and a white for a sorcery. Search your library for an aura or equipment card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. Here's the thing. Birthright Boon is straight up flavor text on this card, and here's why. There are only like 2 actual auras that you would cast in this entire format. Hold on, that doesn't include the removal spell auras in white. I forgot to count those. But the removal spell auras, okay, searching those up does help. But there's only 1 equipment, and that was the red card, this bad bespoke battle garb. And the only auras that you would want to play on Kellen, because that's the point, the other creatures you control get +1/+1 for each aura and equipment attached to Kellen. All you've got is Dragon Mantle and Knightly Valor in white, which costs 5 and is very bad. So this card just really isn't that well supported in Limited. It is probably still a B. Am I going to put it in A? I should probably... No, I just don't want to. I really don't even think this card's that good. It dies to so much. Just giving your creatures a little bit more power for choosing this card, and they already want to kill it is the problem. Yeah, I'm only giving this card a B. It's a very good B. You could maybe do it as an A, but I just don't think this card is going to perform. And I really don't... The adventure just doesn't do anything. It's a little disappointing in all honesty. I would just give it a B to Kellen the Fey-Blooded, but could be wrong. Alright, next up we have Scalding Viper. Colorless and a red for a creature elemental snake. It's a 2/1. Whenever an opponent casts a spell with mana value 3 or less, Scalding Viper deals 1 damage to that player. It's also got a adventure, Steam Clean, colorless and a blue, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. I think this card's really, really good. It is getting an A. Because it says opponent, and so them trying to cast a spell to deal with Scalding Viper deals 1 damage to them. Them trying to play a blocker to get in the way of Scalding Viper deals damage to them, and it's not symmetrical, it only deals damage to them, so you can keep pressing the advantage while you've got this to punish their early plays. And if you do get to play it in blue-red and get access to the adventure, then it's even better. A for Scalding Viper. Alright, next up we have Picnic Runer, colorless and a red for a creature Goblin Rogue. It's a 2/2. Whenever Picnic Runer attacks, while you control a creature of power 4 or greater, Picnic Runer gains double strike until end of turn. It's also got Stolen Goodies, 3 colorless and a green for a sorcery. Distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. So just 2 mana 2/2 double strikers. Is that good enough for a B? I think with the added ability that you could, if it's in green and red, the card's definitely a B. Getting to cast that other part if you draw it later to make your cards better. Also, putting 3 counters on something does help make it 4 power, so it can trigger Picnic Runer. And maybe you can even splash this in some of the aggressive decks, or just being a 2/2 that can gain double strike a little bit later is going to be good enough for a B. Alright, last up the regular cards, we have Imodane's Recruiter, 2 colorless and a red for a creature, Human Knight. When it enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until in turn. It's a 2/2, if I didn't say that already. Oof, give me flashbacks to Reckless Bushwhacker. But it's almost even a little bit better than that because it's got trained troops, 4 colorless and 8 white. For the sorcery, create 2/2/2 white knight creature tokens with vigilance. I think I want to give this card an A. It is just so much to do. If you actually get to cast the trained troops part, it is amazing. But even just this +1/+0 in haste, because it also gives it to itself, so it's always a creatures you control. So it's always a 3-mana 3/2 haste, and it made all of your other creatures more powerful. If you could somehow play this and another spell in a turn to get it haste too, I mean, boy, howdy. I'm giving an A to Imitating Recruiter. Fight me. Alright, next up we have the Enchanting Tales. There's an Enchanting Tale in every pack, and it could be one of the red ones. Alright, first up we have Aggravated Assault, 2 colorless and a red for an enchantment. Pay 3 colorless and red, untap all creatures you control. If it's a main phase, there is an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase. Activate only as a sorcery. Okay, I'm going to give this card a D. If you ever play this, if you play this before turn 8, your opponent is just not going to attack. They're going to leave all their blockers behind and leave all their mana up to deal with your combat step. So it's very face up, unless you play it on turn 8. And on turn 8, not sure how much it's going to do for you. It is a powerful enough card. I'm not that excited about it. I'm giving a D to Aggravated Assault. Alright, next up we have Blood Moon. Blood Moon, very powerful card in Constructed, not very good in card in Limited. It's an F. Makes non-basic land mountains. Your opponents will probably play 99% basics against you. You could maybe bring it in out of your sideboard in 2 out of 3 if your opponents have any of the good man lands, but that, in all honesty, that's probably not worth it. F for Blood Moon. Alright, next up we have Dragon's Mantle, which is quite a bit better. Colorless, not a colorless, just 1 red for an enchantment. It's an aura. Enchant creature, when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Enchanted creature has pay 1 red. This creature gets +1/+0 until end turn. It's red and it says draw a card on it. We're good. I think it's just a C. You could maybe evaluate this at a B. Nah, not much better than that. Alright, next up we have Fiery Emancipation. 3 colorless, red for an enchantment. If a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage instead to that permanent or player. I think this card's an F. Paying 6 mana for this ability is just never going to do as much as you think it does. It doesn't affect the board. It's not going to help you while you're dying. It's just not an effective card at all. Alright, next up we have Goblin Bombardment, on the other hand, which is pretty good. Colorless and a red, sacrifice a creature. Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to any target. This card's an A. Yep. Lots of tokens lying around. Anytime they use a removal spell on one of your creatures, you just get to sacrifice it and deal an extra damage. It basically means they can't play any X1s. I'm giving an A to Goblin Bombardment. Alright, next up we have Impact Tremors. 1 colorless and a red. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, Impact Tremors deal 1 damage to each opponent. B. Pretty good card. It's going to help you deal a lot of damage enough of the time. I think you're going to be happy enough with Impact Tremors part of the time. It was even constructed power level playable back in the day. Alright, Leyline of Lightning. 2 colorless, red for an enchantment. If Leyline of Lightning is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. Whenever you cast a spell, you may pay 1. If you do, Leyline of Lightning deals 1 damage to target player or planeswalker. I think this is kind of dopey. If you ever actually have to pay the mana for it, I think it's really terrible, and it doesn't hit creatures, so I don't think it's going to help out. Yeah, just paying an additional 1 on top of your extra spells to deal a little bit more damage to your opponent, I just don't think it's where you're going to want to be. Alright. Next up we have Mana Flare. 2 colorless and a red for an enchantment. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 mana of any type that land produced. This card's an F. So you're going to play this on turn 3. Then on your opponent's next turn, they're going to play their land and have access to 6 or 8 mana. Yeah, don't do it. I promise you, like, Mana Flare is probably going to kill me a couple of times because my opponent is just going to, like, after I spend all my mana, they're going to spend all their mana on their next turn and then just rip perfect after it every time. But I swear, like, most of the time you're going to play this and then your opponent is going to somehow play the perfect threat and have an answer for Mana Flare to then deny you all the mana. So don't do it. Card sucks. Alright, next up we got Raid Bombardment. Whenever a creature you control with power 2 or less attacks, Raid Bombardment deals 1 damage to the player or planeswalker that creature is attacking. Man, this might be a D, actually. I don't even know if this is a C. Because I think I was thinking of another card when I was reading this initially. This doesn't give them any evasion. It's just you attack with this. You attack with your 2 or less attacker and it deals 1 damage to them. Doesn't seem all that relevant, and then they just block. So, yeah, D for Raid Bombardment. It's not that good. Alright. Repercussion, on the other hand, might be okay. Whenever a creature is dealt damage, Repercussion deals that much damage to that creature's controller. Wait a minute. Is this symmetrical? Is it yours too? So if they block you... Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, this card sucks. Just dealt damage. So, like, I guess there is maybe some combo where you play this card and then, okay, I'll give it a D because, like, I'm thinking here, like, originally I thought it's like you attack, your opponent blocks the normal way, it's a trade, but they take the damage too, but you also take the damage. And so that's really bad. I guess the only way this is good is, like, is if you play Repercussions and then you play something like Torch the Fire and kill one of their creatures and deal them that much damage. Okay, so maybe this is a build around where, like, you only have instant sorceries in your deck besides Repercussion. You play Repercussion and kill their creatures, and that kills them too. On that, in that realm, Repercussion is good. Otherwise, I think it's a trap, and you probably shouldn't play it. Next up, we have Shared Animosity. Whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. This gets to be a C because rats. If you were to be the rats deck and play Shared Animosity, that would be pretty sick. So I'm giving a C to Shared Animosity. There's also, like, just enough. Between knights, humans, and rats, at least in red, there's enough shared creature types that this is going to be enough. And then Sneak Attack is an F. Sneak Attack is a combo card. You really have to be sneak attacking like an absolutely game-winning card for this to be good. Otherwise, having to sacrifice your creature every time when you sneak attack it, it's just not good. So, I'm going to give an F to Sneak Attack in this limited format. Okay, everyone. That is, oh yeah, and this distribution looks pretty good. A little bit more B's than we got D's, but that seems accurate. Alright, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Keep your eyes out for the next tier list. We're going to be finishing up all the colors, multicolored and colorless. Check out the previous ones. And thank you so much for your time, and goodbye.